When I was 15 years old, I couldn't wait to get a job. And I was really lucky when I was a kid. I had a lot of good little part-time jobs, and I learned tons of stuff from those jobs. And when I didn't have a job, when I didn't have some sort of formal obligation to someone, I had to do things like fix fences and haul hay. And possibly in response to that hay hauling, at some point, I started working really hard to become an architect. And so that's what I do today. After architecture school, this country mouse went to the city, and I got a job in Houston. I was not there for very long at all when I realized, despite my enthusiasm for the office, there were some people that really worked harder than others. There were certain people that just worked really, really hard all day long. And they had this endless supply of creativity and optimism, and no matter what happened, it just didn't go away. These are the people who would work all day, and then they would leave for a group dinner, and then they'd jet back to the office Saturday morning to work the kinks out of those ideas. So I counted them. I counted in this firm how many leaders were on the team. And I got just over 20%. But full disclosure, this is not the first time I had counted. I had actually counted in every job that I'd ever had since I was 15. And every time I counted, I got somewhere between 17 and 23%. So I wondered, kind of, what does the working world do with these people? And again, despite my enthusiasm, a little while later I realized they were pretty much treated like everyone else. And it kind of occurred to me over time that it felt like most of managerial's efforts were kind of targeted at policing the 80 versus encouraging the 20. And so time passed by, and several years later I met a friend. And she was like really cool. She had long black hair, and she was tall and thin, and she was like a couple years over 30, which at that point made her sophisticated to me. And so I tried to spend as much time around this girl, kind of hoping that would sort of rub off on me. But here's how she rolled. She got to work every day at 6:30 a.m. and started her day. And she mentored everyone. She answered everybody's questions. She cracked jokes all day long to keep everyone upbeat. She was just kind of the coworker everyone wanted to have. And one day, she and I had been working toward a deadline, and I remember it was a Wednesday, and it was like right after 2 o'clock. And she said, "I don't feel good. I think I might be tired." And I said, "Oh, yeah," and she really didn't look good. And she said, "I think I'm gonna take a break." So she walked downstairs, she got a pack of Skittles, and she walked downstairs and sat on the back porch of the office. And she could not have been there 2 minutes when a member of management came along, and he kind of like looked at her, and he said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just taking a break." Didn't really think anything of it. And he said, "You may not have any idea what's going on here, but we have a lot going on. There's a lot at stake. We do not have time for people to sit around eating candy. You need to get back to work." So my friend was mortified. She raced back to her desk, put her head down, got back to work. And the next morning, it was as if nothing had ever happened. And I kind of wondered about that, but literally she was back to her old self. Well, 10 weeks later, one day after our deadline had passed, my friend left for another firm. Now that's sad. It was sad then, but to me, it feels sadder now because I kind of see the other side. It's like when you own a company or you manage a team, you're looking for resources. You don't have all the answers. You don't know really what to do most days. And so you're looking for resources. And as far as I'm concerned today, you can throw a rock and find some sort of resource for motivating an underperforming employee. But there's just very little known about how to treat these people who are our top 20. So let's just go back to my little survey. So I know that's not a scientific study. I mean, I'm just a 15-year-old kid who started counting. But so I started looking, and I looked on the internet, and I found that the Gallup poll has actually studied this exact same thing. And here's what they came up with. Somewhere between 13 and 26% of people working are engaged. And by engaged, they mean psychologically committed to their job and likely to make a positive contribution. That's it. So that's pretty bad. But probably worse, 24% are actively disengaged from their work. So these are the people where you've asked them to do X, they're on YouTube. They have nothing to do with what's going on. And so I wondered, what is it about the top 20? Why are they different? Well, they're hungry and smart and curious, and they're looking for hard problems to solve. But really, they're intrinsically motivated people. They're not motivated by organic snacks in the break room or a foosball table. These are the kids who didn't care about the trophy. They just want to win. And so I thought about these people. I thought about their faces. I remembered the ones that I've known. And I thought about what they wanted. I thought about myself, because it wasn't that long ago that I worked for someone else. Here's what we wanted. We want a vision. If we're hitching our wagon to you, I want to know where you're going. And I want freedom. This is a big world, and I'm interested in lots of things. And so I want a little more freedom to explore what the world looks like outside of 8 to 5. And I want the chance to kind of live life on my own terms. I want to give you everything I have, but I want to live life on my own terms. And so, as I'm thinking about this, I know that there's a lot of people that fit this description. And I got really excited about it. And when my husband and I started our own firm, we decided we're only going to hire top 20s. Right down there. I'm only going to hire top 20s, and we're going to give them total freedom. And we'll see how that works out. And so, of course, we wondered, is that a viable business model, or is this some sort of Pollyanna spin on the workplace? Well, we've been at it 5 years, and I want to share some of those stories. So we're architects, so we design buildings. And one of the other things we do is we get permits for those buildings. And if you haven't been through that, it's a complicated process, and it can take months if you don't get a handle on it. But there's a guy in our office who's just extraordinary at details. His name's Sam. And so this particular time was a complicated project, 90 minutes away, and for whatever reason, I guess I didn't want to impose, or something happened to my brain that day, I said to Sam, don't worry about this meeting, I'll get it. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yes, I've got this. And so I drove to Houston, where the meeting was, and I got out at the permit office. And if you haven't been to this permit office, it's a paranoid environment, basically because everybody there wants something and they don't know if they can get it. So it's paranoid, but in my case, I had bigger fish to fry because I had made a mistake. And so it was already tense, but it was getting worse for me. And so when I got inside, I said to myself, I'm just going to text Sam. So I texted him and I said, hey, I'm here. I think I'll call you into the meeting when I get in there, which frankly is the only thing I could do at that point. But no sooner had I sent that text, I looked behind me, and I heard this noise, Katie, and I could not even imagine who this was because I don't know a soul here. And it was Sam. And he was walking quickly toward me, clutching this big book of notes. And I couldn't adequately greet him because the dread was leaving my body so quickly. And I was filled with gratitude. And when I could speak to him, I said, what are you doing here? And he said, hey, you need me, I'm here. And I couldn't believe it. But I don't want you to misunderstand me. Being a top 20 is not about age or tenure or title. Have you ever been to a repair shop and you're like waiting on your car, and you're out in the back, and there's this one guy in the repair shop where everyone else is like buzzing around him. He knows the answer to every question, he knows about the schedule, the equipment, and he's the guy who refers to it as my shop. He's your top 20. So you don't need a PhD or 30 years experience. A top 20 is a personality. And so I want to tell you about the youngest top 20 that I've ever known. So when our company just started, we had 3 people, and we decided that we needed to hire an intern. And so because we were broke and scared, but also because we really wanted a top 20, but basically because we were broke and scared, we put this poor 19-year-old kid through this multi-step interview process. Well, she sailed through with flying colors, and we hired her. And so she shows up to work looking like $1 million, and several days later I said to her, hey, how do you like the town? You know, what's going on? Where are you living? And she said, oh, Katie, yeah. Saturday, we were all packing up. I was going to move and I had everything packed up. And I thought to call the apartment complex and just check in, say, hey, I'm on my way. Well, I don't know what happened, but for whatever reason, they didn't have an apartment for me. There was no room. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm literally the only person in this town she knows. And I said, are you commuting every morning from your parents' house 2.5 hours? And she said, no. Got to talking to some family. And my grandpa had an RV in his backyard. And so, I was already packed up, so we hauled it up here, found a hookup, and I'm staying there. And I was like, okay. I could not believe my ears. Number one, I had severely misjudged this girl. She wasn't a 19-year-old kid. She was a 19-year-old woman who understood the commitment that she had made to us. And number two, it may have been a one-room, 3-person office to us, but it was very, very important to her, and she was a top 20. I just want to ask, what if some of the effort that went into policing the 80 went into cherishing the 20? How can we roll out red carpets for these people? How can we move them up? How can we stop thinking about our own position and worry about how they can move up? How can we introduce them to people? How can we say yes to their crazy ideas? Because they do have crazy ideas. And I just want to be here to tell you that it's really, really, really not easy. It's not easy to take this model that's been working for 100 years or so and turn it on its head and somehow expect superior results. It's not easy. But it's worth it, because if we don't, we miss out. We miss out on 10 to 15 years of someone's career, because these top 20s, they don't go at the workday like 8 to 5. They're not packing up at 4:45. So they get to a point in their career, 10 or 15 years from maybe retirement, and it's too much. And so they retire early. So we miss out on that. But we also miss out on tens of thousands of women who leave the workplace every year. Because once you have that first child, 8 to 5 is just near impossible. But saddest of all, we're going to miss out on the millennial generation, because these cats have figured it out. They're going to tech jobs or freelance or sales, where they can live life on their own terms. So if you're somewhat convinced, if you're halfway listening, I'm going to give you something if you want to dip your toe in the water, okay? So Monday morning, you could call your top 20s into your office, 1 or 2 or all, and you could say, hey, I've noticed that every single day you give 150%. And I'm so, so grateful for that. And in exchange, I want to give you just a little bit more freedom to navigate everything you have going on. So from now on, just take lunch whenever you want. Take it at 8, take it at 4, whatever works for you. As long as you've got your bases covered and your team knows what to do, you just take lunch whenever you want. And here's what we know. This is not about lunch. It's about freedom and focus. If you can grant people just a little bit of freedom to navigate this oversaturated world that we live in of demands, they will give you total focus. And maybe one day you would be like us, and you don't even tell them when to show up. You don't tell them what the office holidays are, and you don't designate their maternity. They handle all of that. And it may sound really crazy, but it's not crazy. It's a simple idea of finding the leaders that you can really trust and just trusting them. Thank you so much.